Arsenal dominating teams in Europe, and not just any teams either. Bukayo Saka speaking afterwards, saying that this year feels like the year and a debut for a summer signing we've all been waiting for. This is the Arsenal Raw Reaction Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal News Show. No, it's not. It's the Arsenal Reaction Show. There we go. I got my wires crossed there. But good morning to all of you. Thank you so much as always for joining and making this a part of your morning routines. Incredibly appreciated, and I hope you've had a fantastic week. I'm sure it's been helped by yesterday's results, and thank you for the first show that has been officially started while the channel is over 60,000 subscribers. Thank you very so much for the kind support on the channel and for all of you that are subscribed over the last however many years that have led us to this point. It is massively humbling and hugely appreciated. Good morning to those joining us live in the chat box. Matt G, Blackshine, Tom, Arasilki, we've got James, we've got Glenn, we've got Olawale, Adegoke, Grantley Poos, Odorile, Maximius Babatundi, Knowledge, Tom, Steve, Damien, Temi, Natty, Shari, Morgie, we've got Answer and Jose and Christopher and Louis. Thank you to you all. Lars has been a member for 0 months because he's just joined us. So thank you, Lars Andreas, for your very kind support and welcome to the TGT family as well. Let's not waste any time. Please do drop a like on the video. Of course, as always, it really does help us out if you just press that like button. So please do. We jump into the stories from yesterday's game. Arsenal passing a big test. It was a big test. PSG are one of the best sides in Europe right now and have been very good in the opening games of their Liga season. Of course, already won their opening game of the Champions League run of this league phase as well. Well, despite having a few chances, Arsenal, particularly in the first half, absolutely dominated this game, were controlled, were sensible, were clinical when it came to the chances that they got. And courtesy of Kai Havertz and Bukayo Saka, ended up winning 2-0 on the night to frustrate Luis Enrique's side. And I think certainly, Arsenal in the Champions League sides of past, Bayern Munich were the biggest test Arsenal faced last season. PSG are in and around that level of club. And they looked very controlled this time. With it being a one-off game, you're not getting the opportunity to play those teams again. And so to get that result, to keep the momentum flowing, and of course, to put us in a very good place in terms of the league phase format as well after 2 games with 4 points and 1 tough away game done and 1 tough home game done, it is a very, very nice feeling to be where we are. The game's goals came courtesy, as I mentioned, of Kai Havertz, first of all, who got on the end of a very good Leandro Trossard cross. This is what Havertz has done so well since joining. It's becoming an aerial threat for us in the box. It is improving the threat that is there. It is meaning that we can put these crosses into these areas, as we tried to do at the start of Mikel Arteta's tenure, you remember. We used to put cross after cross after cross to Aubameyang or to Lacazette, and we just never really felt like we had that target. We never really felt like we had that presence. And now we do. And now we've got this danger. Now we've got this feeling, we've got this presence. And yeah, Havertz had a very good display outside of just the goal. He set up Gabriel Martinelli for what should have been another Arsenal goal. He was physically imposing, some really good touches, some good movements, some good layoff and passes. Really good performance from Kai Havertz on the night. And, he picked up the Man of the Match awards. I think it was close between a few players. I think William Saliba definitely had a say in that conversation. I think Gabriel as well, and I think Partey as well. And actually, we'll talk about Partey a little bit more in a minute. But our second goal came directly this time. We say Arsenal are too reliant on set pieces. Well, we can score directly from them as well. We need a few things to go our way. But ultimately, Bukayo Saka's direct free kick going through a crowd of bodies and right past Donnarumma. Now, I don't know about you, but I wasn't too impressed by Donnarumma. He is arguably one of the top 5 goalkeepers in the world. But from both of Arsenal's goals, the word I would use is flappy. I would describe him as a bit flappy. And I think Arsenal's pressure and their aerial threat, and considering his height as well as a goalkeeper, we really unsettled Gianluigi Donnarumma and caused lots of problems. He made a few good saves, of course. The Martinelli save, as I've already brought up, definitely is one of those. But I just felt as though that I didn't get the same sense of presence from him as I usually do. There were some corners, of course, that he dealt with well and caught. But yeah, I have to say, and of course, he has only just come back from injury. It's worth pointing out, as Philip says in the chat box. But still, flappy is what I would use to describe Donnarumma, based purely on that game. But yes, I want to talk about Thomas Partey, who I thought had a really good display. There's been a lot of pressure, a lot of criticism of Partey's performances this season, but I thought he was really good in this game. He broke up play really, really well. Some really good kind of spreading of the play as well into the wide areas. And I think physically, him and Rice, of course, against João Neves and Vitinha was kind of a symbol of the entire game. Like, it just felt like Arsenal were just much more dominant, much more physically imposing, and we could just kind of bully PSG. There was a real feeling of difference between the two sides, that PSG were relying very heavily on their technical quality. They were relying very heavily on their, just how indeed they approached the game with, the quick, slick passing. But their attacks were broken up. Any, time they got into the box, we were very physical. It was Saliba and Gabriel, of course, as well, and Havertz too, of course. Lots of physically really dominant figures, and I think Partey had a very, very good performance. I think that some individuals, I was looking for my social feed yesterday, are really in danger of falling into a few traps with players. There's kind of a feel that Partey will move on, at the end of this season. And I think maybe because of that feeling, a lot of people are using the opportunity to kind of like wind down their view of Partey naturally throughout the course of the season. And, there are times where he needs to be criticised for some of his performances, and that has happened this season, but definitely not this game. This game was a really good performance from Thomas Partey, and was worthy of plenty of criticism, and not one that I would have used at all to kind of point fingers at him whatsoever. Jurrien Timber as well. First half, because we only have a first half to analyse, because he came off in the second half. Arteta said he felt something muscular and they didn't want to take any risks. I saw him after the game. He was moving comfortably. It didn't look like there was anything, too wrong if there was, or he was putting on a brave face, but he looked fine from what the small amount I did see of him after the game. But first half, I thought Jurrien Timber was stunningly good. Like, so stunningly good. The physicality, the technicality, the progression, the link up, the bossing of Barcola. I thought it was a really good battle in the first half between Timber and Barcola. He just dealt so well with so much. And I know we've talked about, people saying Ben White's in trouble. And I don't think that's the case. I think Arsenal need versatility. We need options. We need to be able to rotate and have quality throughout the side. But Timber is just some hell of a player. Absolutely astonishingly good footballer. And it's exciting to see him in the team this season. And when he came off, Calafiori, of course, moved into that right back slot and did well. It was quite funny. I was, looking at his performance anyway as a kind of an overall feeling, and he was popping up in the kind of number 10 position. He was on the right centre midfield position, left centre midfield position, left wing. He was everywhere, Calafiori, and of course had to then deputise in that right back slot. Kivior then came on for the left back position. I was a little bit concerned at the start. In the first 5 minutes of Kivior's performance, I was a little concerned by his distribution in particular, but I actually thought Kivior grew into the game by the end and had a really decent display come 90 minutes. But Calafiori, to move into that right back position and to have to play a role that he's not really played was really, really good. Still got that chaos about him, that tenacity. He flies into challenges sometimes. He's really determined to win the ball back and break up play. And I think, when Arteta was asked about the defenders in the pre-match press conference, he talked about first these players needed to love defending first. And you can just tell that Calafiori loves defending. And that's the feel that I got from what Calafiori displayed in both left back and right back positions. Just final thoughts on one more player before we move to the table and to part two and your questions as well. Mikel Merino, of course, made his debut for Arsenal. I had the opportunity to speak with him after the game. You'll see that interview a bit later on today. But I thought Mikel Merino was really assured coming off the bench for someone, of course, who's not played in quite some time. He came into a game at a phase that was really challenging because when you're coming into the game at this point, you have to get up to speed very, very quickly, don't you? And you have to be in the moment to be able to understand what the pace and what the point of the game and the development of the game has been at this stage. And I thought he absorbed it very quickly. Some good tackles. He broke up play really well. Some good confident passes as well. There's a really nice tackle on the left-hand side that he slid in and won the ball back to really give the crowd something to cheer about. So, yeah, it just really, really positive to see Merino in the side and to see his presence in the team. And I'm interested to see. Of course, I was expecting it to be Partey that came off, and I do expect it to be eventually a midfield of Merino, Odegaard, and Rice, and to see what they can do. Will he play on Saturday? Will he start on Saturday? I guess we'll have to wait and see. But Mikel Merino makes his debut for Arsenal and looks very, very good. Arsenal, with that win, have moved, at least until this evening, into the top 8 standings of the UEFA Champions League table, of course. There are currently 5 teams sitting on 4 points, but there are a number of teams, of course, that have still only played one game, including the likes of Bayern Munich and Liverpool, Juventus, Real Madrid, Benfica, Atletico Madrid, Monaco, Atalanta have all played just one game so far. So I think Arsenal will be, come the end of today, moving down into that bottom 16. But still a really good result for Arsenal, and certainly will be putting themselves into really good positions, and gets 2 of their trickiest games, of course, out the way as well. Really good to see those 2 games navigated. They've got a home game against Shakhtar before they then go to the San Siro to play Inter. They then go away to Sporting, and then they've got a couple of home games against Monaco and Dinamo Zagreb before they then go away to Girona in the final match day in January. So we're in a really good place after 2 games to get those 4 points and to get them on the board and to get those games done. I think Dub put it well in the chat box. We are starting to cook, lads, and that's certainly how I felt at full time. I've really felt this feeling that Arsenal are starting to get into a really good place, a good rhythm, and I think we saw that in Bukayo Saka's interview of CBS as well after the game too, which I thought was really, really good, and unsurprising to see him talk so confidently about thinking that this could be the season that Arsenal win a title. And that was really good to see him say that, and also talking about how Arsenal need to change the way. The way in which we face kind of teams away from home. Orfs in the chat says we have to beat Shakhtar away. No, we don't. We've got them at home, mate. We're playing them at the Emirates, so you don't need to worry about that. But we do need to improve our away performances in Europe, and Inter Milan's going to be a huge, huge test. So that is going to be something to keep an eye on. As you should also be keeping an eye on your VPN needs and only using if indeed you have got some VPN needs, which, let's be honest, if you don't have a VPN, then you've got VPN needs. There's only one way to go, and that is, of course, with NordVPN, who can bring you the safety and security that Arsenal's physicality can on any night in Europe. By going to nordvpn.com/Gooner, you can get yourself a significant discount off a 1 or a 2-year plan with 4 months extra months thrown in free on top of that 2-year deal as well. If you're not happy with the service for whatever reason, there is that 30-day money-back guarantee, as I've mentioned many a time before. So if you're not happy, you can just think, well, this was good, this was great, but for some reason, I don't want to keep this great service, so I'm just going to use my 30-day money-back guarantee. But I don't know why you would do that, but it's there. It gives you that peace of mind. Geolocation, of course, changing that digitally on your mobile, your tablet, or indeed your laptop. Absolute must in the modern day society. If you're traveling around the world, you need a VPN. If you're using public Wi-Fi services, you need a VPN. And this is the only VPN that you need to think about. And of course, you can win a signed and framed, well, not framed, but just signed. I mean, it doesn't need to be framed. It's a brilliant piece of Arsenal memorabilia. It's a signed Gabriel Martinelli shirt after his goal against Leicester, after his good performance last night against PSG. You can win this brilliant piece of Arsenal mantelpiece jealousy. And not only that, but there is a signed and framed version of a Gabriel Jesus shirt as a instant win prize that is also signed, and a signed William Saliba shirt and a signed David Raya shirt, as well as plenty of instant win prizes as well. Link, as always, to the description and you go to the competitions page, scroll down and find the latest Arsenal competitions. Best of luck to all of you that get involved. It is UK only as well. Well, let's go to part 2 of your hopefully enjoyment of this show and your questions too, right after this. Okay, this is part 2 of the show. We tackle some of your questions in the chat box and tackle some of your thoughts as well. So let's jump in. If you use a capital Q, it does, of course, help them stand out. And if you would be ever so kind to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel as well, that would be hugely appreciated. We've got a year target in 2024 of trying to reach the Emirates Stadium capacity of 60,704, and we're now less than 700 subs away from that rather ambitious target we set ourselves, which is crazy when you consider, this is just a pokey little Arsenal show that we do every morning at 8 a.m. And we've managed to get to quite a considerable amount of people that watch this crazy thing. So, yes, thank you to all of you that have continued to support us. It is massively, massively appreciated. Right. So, yes, jumping into the chat box and going to some of your questions. Darius says, oh, my word. Imagine Martinelli scored that volley. What a goal that would have been. Perhaps goal of the season. Some lovely passing play, little dinks and chips. If he'd have put it anywhere other than where he put it, he hit it almost too well, I think. Then ultimately Martinelli would have been on the end of one of Arsenal's best chats. Luke Shaw says, Tom, I'm being bullied in the chat box. Our resident Man United fan says, Luke, after he said earlier in the chat box, the issue I have with Arsenal fans is why should Rice be in trouble because Calafiori is playing well? Why do you all have to look to create drama inside your team? Would it be so bad to have good players? Luke, I think you're riling them up, mate. Can't cry wolf, fella. Doesn't work that way, I'm afraid, my friend. Amira says, Timber's so good, everyone casually forgets that he missed an entire season of football and started panicking when he's taken off, as if we don't have more than capable options on the bench who also need minutes. And I think that the fact that we lost him for all of last season, yes, we had White, yes, we had Zini and Tommy and Kivior, players that could cover in those positions, but Timber's just a different element that adds such a new level of quality and consistency to that back four that we absolutely missed him. And, to think we finished just 2 points off Man City last season, that 2 points could have been Jurrien Timber. That could have been the difference for us last season. We just won't know. RDSM, please show respect to Partey and other players. Let's appreciate the depth of the squad and know that we must not slate our players. There can be healthy competition in the squad without insults. I don't think that's targeted at me, considering that I spent a good few minutes of the first part of the show talking about how impressive Thomas Partey's performance was. I think that he is worthy of criticism for some of his games this season, but I don't think last night was one of them. Process says, Tom, after seeing Mikel Merino last night, what is our strongest starting 11 if everyone is fit? If everyone is fit, my best 11 at the moment, I think, would be Raya, White, Saliba, Gabriel, Timber, Rice, Mikel Merino, Odegaard, Saka, Havertz, and Martinelli. That at the moment, I think is our best team. Ashish says, hi Tom, have you had a chance to look at Liverpool's schedule after the international break? Do you think they'll stay in the title race? Yes, we've talked about it actually. We talked about theirs and we've talked about Chelsea's schedules after the international break are very challenging indeed, including of course that game at the Emirates, which will be a big game for both teams. Fiddy says, T, is it just me or is Gabriel Jesus moving selfishly lately, especially with that unsettling clip of him not celebrating after we took the lead against Leicester? I don't know that's unsettling. I think that's unnecessary, to be honest. I don't think there's anything wrong with Gabriel Jesus, to be honest. He's not in the starting 11. Of course, that is frustrating for him. He wants to be playing more regularly. He doesn't want to be a substitute, and that may lead to him, maybe moving on next summer. I would be unsurprised to see him leave the club next summer, but I don't think he's moving necessarily selfishly. In fact, if you think about the game against Bolton, he was involved in one of the goals, was he not? I think it was Havertz's goal that he was involved in. By the way, just on Havertz, that's the 6th Emirates home game in a row that Kai Havertz has scored in. Of course, he could get a chance to bag a 7th in a row on Saturday against Southampton. Matt G says, Tom, what do you make of Bruno Fernandes' red card getting overturned? Do you think there should be repercussions for the ref and VAR? I think I was a little surprised to see it overturned because I think there was a lot of discussion around, his kind of studs go quite high, he lifts his legs. Some people say he slips. I was surprised. I'm glad in some ways, not for Man United fans, but you want to see the accountability. You want to see them be able to reassess these things and look that they can make these changes. Should there be repercussions for the referee and VAR if they think they've made a glaring error, so much so that they've overturned it? Then yeah, without doubt, that the referees and the VAR should miss a week, and there should be more accountability as well. Tommy says, what I'm loving, Tom, is that we're getting results, playing well, but still nowhere near our best. Very, very exciting. Absolutely. I agree with you. Ashley says, takeaways from the game. My fullback needs to have ingenuity, risk-taking in attack, and concentrate aggressive in defending. Timber has that. Calafiori blends his attacking instincts in defensive game a bit too much. I think, obviously, he's only just come into the team, so that will gradually change. Gary says, do you think the journalist retort with Pep after his question was highly unprofessional became a conversation where he tried to project and insinuate things that weren't true and just showed bias? We're way past that now, Gary, to be fair. That was like a week ago. I'm conscious of moving on from that stuff now, but I think the journalist in particular, said a lot of the words like time wasting and dark art stuff and professional fouling. He made it quite clear, I think, what he was talking about. Angus says, Tom, would you start a few youth players this weekend against Southampton? Would be awesome to experience Lewis Skelly and Nwaneri, and the Saints have looked super average so far. I think Nwaneri's got a chance, but I wouldn't be playing more than him. I think that Southampton still can be threatening. Ramsdale is going to be in goal, and it's going to be weird seeing Aaron there and in the back of the net for another team, and you can expect maybe a bit of a masterclass from him, but hopefully that won't be the case, and hopefully we absolutely batter them. Quite frankly. King says, Tom, do you think Miles Lewis-Skelly is ready to take Jorginho's role in the team next season and only buy one more DM once Partey leaves? I don't know, King. I think we'll have to wait and see. I think we've got a lot more football still to be played. He's played not many minutes at a senior level yet. It'll be impossible to know if he's ready to take on that role from him. So I think we're going to have to wait and see. Christopher says, any news on Ben White? Not at the moment. He was in contention, as Arteta described ahead of this game. So maybe he gets back in the squad for the game against Southampton. Maybe they'd be more careful with him and just rest him and just allow him to recover more naturally. It depends, I guess, maybe on Timber's situation as well. So there's a lot of question marks. Tizer says, every time I watch Semenyo, I think he would be good for our team. What do you think? Also disappointed Saka wasn't taken off for Sterling late, considering we now have that change. Saka did come off late again for Lewis Skelly. So I don't think there's anything really to be disappointed by with that. Semenyo's had a good start to the season. The next step for him will be, moving to a club in the top half of the table. And Bournemouth at the moment being a good start to the season, but you wouldn't expect him to finish there. But I think that will be the next natural step for him. Maybe it could be with Arsenal. Andrew says, Tom, good morning. Congratulations to the Gunners. I will plead that we continue some of our players returning from injury should not be rushed since there is still so much still to play. Eamon says, hi, Tom. What are the major differences that you see in Timber and White's strengths and right back when would the gaffer use each player when both are fit? They're different types of players. Timber is a lot more technical. He can move the ball slightly differently to Ben White, whereas Ben White I look at as a player that you can use with Timber. So Timber can play at left back. You'd use it. So as I said earlier, my best team is Timber left back, White at right back, because Timber's so versatile that he can play on both sides very comfortably. And White, still extremely good, has been arguably the best right back in the league for a long time. I like the fact that his combination play with Saka is probably slightly better because he's had a lot longer, of course, to play with him. But Timber is bombing on up the field really well and, made that assist for Martinelli against Leicester. So he's also showcasing that. They're just both really, really good. And I'm just very glad that we've got both of them in the squad. Ruben says Saka has been world class. Even without Odegaard, he has become more aggressive, positive, and the best creative outlet for us. His development continues to be insane. Robert says, good to see Tommy back with the squad as well. If we kept him fit, it would be a terrific addition to the squad. And Freddie says, Timber is much better in one-on-ones than Ben White is at the moment. I think that's harsh on Ben White. Ben White is excellent at one-on-one defending. Timber is also excellent at one-on-one defending. I really hope people don't fall into the trap of now saying things like that aren't true, about Ben White just because Timber is being good. Both of them are really good. Both of them are excellent players, and we should we should be able to enjoy the fact that we've got both of them as options for the foreseeable future because they both look really, really, really good. Biko says, Tom, I don't often criticize us, but I'm not happy with our fans in the stadium. The atmosphere is often dominated by away fans despite win or losses. Maybe my telly broadcasts away the noise only. So I actually saw a tweet from friend of the show, Rory Talks Football, on social media, who was at the game last night. I was, of course, there as well. He tweeted saying, the Emirates has been really poor tonight. I can't lie. Borderline unacceptable for a UCL game. Club need to sort it out. Now, I had a look, and Rory, I think, was in the upper tier last night. I can tell you that the lower tier was very good. It wasn't like Bayern Munich, and it was a bit flat, like going into the anthems and stuff. Champions League nights are tricky at the beginning of games. They're actually harder to build atmosphere for than the league games. And the reason for that is because a number of reasons, actually. The first one is North London Forever and the lineups in Premier League games get played right before the kickoff. So it really builds the atmosphere for the home fans in the stadium. In the Champions League nights, the order of proceedings means that they get played earlier. Now, my only criticism of Arsenal fans sometimes is I wish they'd get into the ground sooner. That's really the only thing that I could argue at this point. But being in the stadium, the atmosphere wasn't, I don't think, can be fairly described as unacceptable. PSG supporters and European supporters in general are always excellent. It's not an Arsenal thing. It's actually an English football thing. You will very rarely find support like you do with European clubs, when they're in those grounds or even in their home grounds. I went to the Lens game last season. It was one of the most amazing spectacles of footballing support I've ever seen at a home game. There was hundreds, if not thousands, of flags in the home end across the Lens Stadium. It was unbelievable. I've never witnessed anything like it. We have some of the best away supporter in terms of kind of how they bring the noise. But there is something about the upper and lower tiers, I think, in the Emirates. If you're in the lower tiers, the atmosphere is a lot better. So to describe the whole stadium when you've sat in the upper tier, as Rory did, and I'm saying this respectfully, and Rory's entitled to a response, as always, but I just feel as though that was really quite generic to describe the entire ground as one such thing. Whereas in the lower tier, where I sat, where the press box is, I'm not surrounded, side by side with supporters. There's gaps. And so I'm a little bit, in some ways, detached, but the atmosphere was still good for a lot of the lower tier. And of course, when we scored, that helped to build a little bit, and there was still some good chanting, the tifos that went out before the game. But Champions League games are slightly different. And I think there is something to do with, some people point out the Ashburton Army's allocation has been cut, which it has. I personally don't think that is the primary reason behind the atmosphere not being as good. It's definitely a factor. I think it would be, naive to not point it as a factor. But the problem is that I think it's a mentality thing from my perspective. I remember when we first competed for the title in 22-23, and when you're competing for the title in that state of such surprise, the atmosphere was unbelievable. And that coincided, of course, with the Ashburton Army having a greater capacity at that time. But I think that was more coincidental than anything else. I think the mentality was that it was such a surprise Arsenal in the title race that season. It really grew this aura around the noise inside the stadium. And as, of course, Arsenal have established themselves in the title race, there is always, I get more of a sense of, if we're not in front in the first 5 minutes, the noise can drop a bit. And I think that's just a mentality perspective. I don't think it's an Arsenal thing. As I said, I think it's an English football thing. You go to any ground in the country, like Anfield, for instance, as someone who's been to Anfield for one of the biggest games when they have Arsenal at their ground, after Never Walk Alone, the atmosphere drops considerably. And that, at the end of the day, is, I think it's more of an English football fan thing. And I speak that as an English football fan myself. Whenever I go abroad, whenever I've watched games, whenever I've seen foreign sides come to the Emirates, the support is always different. And I think it's just a culture thing. People say, like, how can 3,000 PSG fans outsing the entire Emirates? They sang for the entire game. And the reality is that you are going to find away supporters in general at matches are going to generate a better atmosphere than sometimes an entire crowd at home will, because you could be more organized, you can be more collaborative. You're going to get people going to away games typically on a perspective that, of course, that commitment to travel to those away games as well. It's especially abroad, that motivation that it takes to do that from a mental standpoint and from a cultural standpoint will, of course, be always like that. But they were in the ground 45 minutes before the kickoff. I was inside the stadium. I usually go out about half an hour before kickoff, but I was out there about 45 minutes before kickoff. Their stand was already full 45 minutes before kickoff, and they were already chanting. Arsenal players came out to warm up. They got booed and whistled as soon as they came out. PSG players come out. They're then off. They're raucous. They're jumping before kickoff. It was unbelievable. But it's a culture thing. If you listen to away games in the Premier League, you can hear Arsenal's fans above the home crowd 9 times out of 10. 9 times out of 10 at Premier League away games, you hear the Arsenal fans through your television sets way more than you do the home fans. It's just a thing. It's just part of it. I think attacking the Emirates Stadium and the people that went to that game is wrong, in my view. I think it's really wrong to attack and to criticize the supporters. And especially from the perspective if you sat in different parts of the ground, because different parts of the ground are different and you do experience the noise differently. You do experience the atmosphere differently in those parts of the stadium. Chan in the chat box says, we're always stood in the lower tier and the atmosphere is always great. People also came to games straight from work and it's generally going to be slightly flatter. And this is true. There were tickets available on the exchange right up until kickoff. That's been an absolute, that hasn't happened in a long time. And evening games can sometimes be much trickier because it's not an afternoon game where people have been able to go to the pub for a few hours beforehand and the raucousness isn't there. People are coming straight from work. So there are reasons. There are absolutely reasons that are behind it. And just the last point on Rory's tweet, which was club need to sort it out. What do you want the club to do? What more can they do? I've never seen our stadium announcer try harder to get fans up for it at halftime as well. At halftime, the stadium announcer was giving it the full beans, as he does usually before kickoff in the first half, more so than I've ever seen before. The tifos were out on both ends of the ground. I thought it was a really strange thing to do to criticize the club. It's, if you want to criticize, anyone, the only criticism I usually have is I feel like fans can get in the ground quicker, and the club, to be fair to them, put incentives in place like cheaper drinks and food and stuff on certain days to get people into the ground quicker. They really try and get people into the ground. They're obviously investing also in ways in which we're trying to speed up the process that fans can get into the stadium also. But, there is an element that you need to take ownership. We need to take ownership as well. I don't like the tourist fan element. Nunandinho says, I was surrounded by tourist fans. Not one of them supported Arsenal. I really struggle with this. Now, I'm not saying this is you in particular, Nunandinho, But some people that use this whole tourist fan thing are just being xenophobic at the end of the day. Because I know plenty of supporters that are technically, by definition, tourists because they come from abroad and they don't live locally to watch the games, but they sing and they shout and they chant louder than some of the people that have come from 5 miles away or 5 minutes away. So I hate this stereotype of the tourist fan element. The tourist fan element is frankly like a joke. And also, there were tickets available on the exchange with hours left until kickoff. So it's not like tourist fans are taking tickets away from people that want to go. If you wanted to go, you could have got a ticket. If you were living 10 minutes from the ground or an hour from the ground, you wanted to go, there were tickets available. You could have gone because there were tickets that you could have got your hands on. So I hate the tourist fan element because the suggestion that people that come from abroad or come from further afield just don't scream, shout, chant, and sing, and every season ticket holder in the ground does, is a farce. It's an absolute farce. 45,000 plus people in that stadium. Sorry, 45,000 just under, around that figure. 40 to 45,000 people in that ground are season ticket holders. That's more than 2/3 of the entire capacity of the ground. And you're telling me it's tourist fans, fans that have come from abroad, fans that have come from further afield, that are the ones that are the problem. I'm sorry, but that's a load of bollocks. Like, it's absolute bollocks, and it's xenophobic, is what it is. I'm sick and tired of it. I'm really sick and tired of fans from abroad getting the fingers pointed at them just because they come from abroad and people assume that they're tourists. If you're looking around and you're going, oh, that guy's not singing. Oh, she's not chanting. Must be tourist fans. That's you. That's a you problem. You know, that's nothing to do. They may not have been from abroad. How do you know they're tourist fans? Just because they're not singing? Because I guarantee you in the season ticket seats, there's going to be a lot of fans that you're also looking at going, oh, they're not singing. They're not chanting. They're not standing up and starting chants. For me, it's a culture thing. Like it's just the way that it is. Like in English football. Home games, atmospheres aren't as great. There are very few grounds in the country you can go to where you get genuinely amazing atmospheres. Selhurst Park is one. St James's Park is another. The first 5 minutes of Liverpool games are. But, you know, there's not many... Aston Villa's pretty good. There's not many Premier League grounds I've not been to cover the Arsenal. So I have a pretty good idea of what they're like. And I get sick and tired with this stereotype of just pointing the finger at tourist fans. I've had some pretty horrible people jump on this channel and say some pretty horrible things in phone-in shows when we've had this topic, and I'm sure some of you have watched it. And thankfully, we've argued them into looking pretty silly. But I just, I can't get my head around it. I can't get my head around it. How some people have this weird, strange obsession with tourist fans being the problem when 40,000 plus people in the ground are season ticket holders. It's a very, very, very strange. It's a very, very strange view. It's a very, very, very strange view. A few more questions, I think, before we wrap up. Twinny says, yeah, that was my question. How do you know they're tourist fans? This is when we get into murky, murky waters. It's not murky for me, mate. It's not murky for me at all. It's clear as day. Some people are just xenophobic. Like it's just true. They see people not singing and they assume, oh, they cannot be local Arsenal fans. They just make that split-second assumption that they're not an Arsenal fan or they're just a tourist fan. It's not murky. It's clear as day that exists for some people and they need to get it out of their minds. And if you've got an issue with people in the ground not chanting, if the person not next to you is singing, ask them a question. There's nothing wrong with asking them a question. Turn to them and say, excuse me, mate, like, I noticed that you sit here quite quietly. Like, is there any reason why you don't get involved in the chanting or don't start a chant or anything like that? And of course, I hope that you, as someone who's asking that question, is someone who tries to start chanting. It's worth pointing out. And I hope that people like Rory, who tweeted criticising the club and criticising the fans inside the stadium, were standing up with their arms outstretched, looking around, trying to start chants themselves. I really hope that's the case. And I assume that Rory did that by putting that tweet out. Because why on earth would you criticise anybody for not screaming and shouting if you yourself aren't standing up and trying to start some chants in the stadium? You know, my personal criticism that I think is fair is that people can get into the stadium earlier. That's the only thing I would say is I think people spend too long in the pubs and they can go in the ground a bit earlier and make the process of getting as many people in the ground for kickoff better. And I say that as someone, of course, who always gets in the ground very early because I have to work. But when I was going to games, I also was getting into the ground as a fan very early. And when I go as a fan, which is a very rare occasion these days, I get in there, you know, a good half an hour at least before the games. Of course, the costs of the pints don't help, but the club do put on things for certain games to get people in the grounds quicker. And I would say that a pint being £7, which it can be, and a pint being £5, I'd pay £2 extra to get in the ground half hour earlier. That's all I'd say on that one. If we're going to moan about the cost of a pint, I would get in the ground half an hour earlier at the cost of £2 to make sure that I'm in the stadium. Is my view on the kind of the cost side of things. So yeah. Andy, I love these comments. Chill, Tom. Talk about the team, man. I mean, Andy, there was half an hour of that. You can go and listen back if you like. We talked about the team for half an hour. We've only been on this bit for 10 minutes. It's like a quarter of the show. 75% is football, man. It was all there, bro. Jabu says, may I ask a question? Because I'm not in England and I don't know. The atmosphere was 10 times better in the year that the Ashburton Army was together. Why is there not a major factor in the change of atmosphere? I said it's one of the factors, Jabu. It's one of the factors. But I think that season where the Ashburton Army had a bigger capacity, of course, did coincide with the season that we had a surprise title challenge. And I think that mentally, when you go from a surprise title challenge and this momentum and this aura that we had in 22-23 to 23-24, which was a mentality of a greater feeling of expectation that we would compete for the title, you lose that same aura because there's an entitlement, there's an expectation that starts to breed amongst supporters. So you don't have that same. I can tell you for 100% that the people complain about tourist fans in 22-23 when the atmosphere was really, really good. It was probably at its peak that I've experienced. There was as many tourist fans then as there are now. It's harder with the ballot for tourist fans to get in the stadium. So fans that think that it's actually like the ballot in an instance, for instance, that the ballot makes it harder for what would be wrongly described as loyal fans to get tickets. Loyalty is a subjective term always, but the ballot actually makes it far harder. I get messages from people around the world all the time saying, Tom, I really want to go to a game. I live in America or Australia or Africa or Asia, and I'm coming over in XYZ month. How do I get hold of a ticket? And I just say to them, like, I'm going to be really honest with you, like, you're going to struggle. My advice is always go to your supporters club that represents your area if you have one, because sometimes they get an allocation, and of course enter the ballot. Because going through secondhand, I had someone message me, and I won't reveal their names. I don't think they want me to. I had someone ask me the other day, I'm trying to get tickets for the Newcastle game, and I was like, okay, the tickets will be out. They won't be out yet because it's quite a little bit away still. And then I realized that the away game was first. Like they said, they've been quoted a price of like £500 for a ticket for the Newcastle game, and I was like, yeah, that sounds like it's coming from a second-hand party. So I'd be really careful about being scammed. Always be really, really careful. And then I realized that we're not playing Newcastle at home until like next year. So there's no way that those tickets are available yet. And these people are being quoted like £500 a ticket. And I'm like, you are going to get scammed. Because, of course, sometimes the fans aren't going to be aware that those tickets aren't even going to be available until much, much closer to the game. Because they release, of course, around 2 months or so before the fixture. So if that sometimes. So the idea that you're being quoted a price for a ticket for a game that's next year, like people need to be so careful. So it's actually harder for quote unquote tourist fans, horrible application of the term, but that's the reality. Some fans are coming from abroad. So technically, by definition, they are a tourist. It's harder for tourists to get tickets because the ballot makes it almost impossible to plan a trip. months in advance because you can't get the ticket. You can't get it anymore. And if you are unsuccessful in the ballot, you are then able to enter the ticket exchange. That's the rule. That's how it works. If you don't get a ticket in the ballot, you are then able kind of to access the ticket exchange. And last night, the ticket exchange went on sale to everyone, not just people that were in the ballot, which must mean, and I would love someone to come to tell me that they weren't successful in the ballot for the PSG game. If you are someone that was not successful in the ballot for the PSG game, can someone explain to me if that's true? Why were there ticket exchange tickets available to the general public, other than maybe last-minute season ticket holders putting them on the site? That's the only thing I can come up with. But surely, if the ticket exchange went to the general public, everyone in the ballot must have got a ticket, no? Unless there was some late surge of tickets being made available again on the exchange. So yeah, let me. I'm curious to get people's thoughts. If you're listening to the catch up, please do get in touch with me because I'm very curious about that element. VRL says, yeah, it's unfair that I get called a tourist fan when I've been watching on TV since I was 9. I'm not fake. I'm just poor. It's a very honest and humble admission, VRL. And if you've been watching Arsenal for 10 years, 20 years, 40 years, or 20 minutes, you're as much of a fan as anyone else. If you love the club, if you love Arsenal unequivocally, if you want them to win every single game, which sadly some fans who think they're real fans can't even themselves say over these last 5 years. If you've wanted Arsenal to win every single game they've played, if you back them to the hilt and you want them to be the best team in the world, it doesn't matter if you've got 10p or 10 grand to spend. You're as much of a fan as anybody else. And don't let anyone else take that away from you. Don't let some horrible people that feel as though because they can, by the luck of birth, be able to go to games, think that they're more of a fan than you are, because they're not. They're just not. It's very, very entitled to think that they are. Tom says, I failed in the PSG ballot. I can't be on my phone at work, so I can't spend all my time on the ticket exchange. It's ridiculous that you don't receive alerts that tickets are available for gigs. So this is mad to me. So how have people failed in the ballot? And yeah, how have the people that failed in the ballot then seen the ticket exchange go on general? Maybe someone can provide some clarity to me. Chan says exchange should have been fully opened up the day before, not hours before. That's one way the club can improve. And I think that's probably a fair criticism. If there is a lot of tickets on the exchange, a day, like 24 hours before kickoff, that's when you open it up. Don't open it up a few hours before. Open it up a day before. That, I think, is a fair lesson and a fair criticism of the club that can certainly be taken on board, and I hope will be taken on board in the future. Angus says, in these people's eyes, are our newer players like Calafiori and Merino tourists who cannot show passion for the club? It's undefendable logic. And I think this is a great point. I brought this up. The irony that fans who feel as though the stadium should be filled from people within 15, 20 minutes of the ground and yet cheering on players who have come from thousands of miles all the way around the world to play for their club is just the biggest hypocrisy and the most hilarious contradiction that there is. So it's quite funny. One Song Soup says these fans who complain about tourist fans need to understand that the Premier League wouldn't be the biggest league in the world without those tourists. You wouldn't be seeing Arsenal have the spending power they have if it wasn't for an ownership that comes from abroad. You wouldn't see the amazing culture, the amazing support, the global fan base that brings Arsenal so much if it wasn't, of course, for this element of family across borders. The idea that football and football clubs should be so insular. I mean, look at Wrexham right now. And people are indifferent about this, but the ownership have come in from abroad. They've bought the club and changed everything and changed the fortunes of that club. And of course, sometimes it goes the other way, and that's part of football. But like the idea that this insular, selective, weird kind of like gatekeeping that some people wish was in place because they selfishly think that they deserve a ticket more than somebody else just because of the luck of where they were born is mental. It's absolutely mental. Like it's just so detached from reality and incredibly selfish as well. Malcolm says if you fail in the ballot, often people end up making different arrangements and tickets on the exchange usually get snapped up in seconds as well. It's a fair point. And Amira says entering the ballot would require an Arsenal membership, which isn't cheap, and even that doesn't guarantee a ticket as well. You can only actually enter the ballot, can't you? If sorry, you can only enter the ticket exchange, I think, if you enter the ballot. Usually it got opened up to the wider members as well. And I know a lot of people are cancelling their memberships, and I absolutely empathise with their reasons why when it becomes harder to get tickets. But the reality is that some people couldn't sit at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in a queue to get tickets for a game because they're teaching or they're performing surgery or they're looking after people that need looking after. And they have got jobs that don't allow them to be able to do that. And why should they be punished for having those types of jobs? They shouldn't be. Everyone who wants to go to a game should have an equal opportunity, whether you've been going a week, a year, a decade. Yeah, it's been great. And I'm sure people have enjoyed being able to go more regularly than they've been able to go more recently. But I'm sorry, there are a lot of people unlike you that haven't been able to do that and have deserved as much as you have to be able to go to those games. So that's where we're at. The ballot Gooner, the well-named ballot Gooner in our chat box says, Tom, there are more fans who support Arsenal based outside of the UK. People need to educate themselves on what constitutes a fan base. Angus says, I have gone to Australian football matches with Aussie rules fortnightly for years. It would be awesome for that to find a broader audience to get more diversity. It's a positive thing in any code. Louis says, Tom, I couldn't the club release tickets like 3 or 4 lots across the frames to give others a chance? There are things the club can do, Louis. It's like it's not perfect. There are things that certainly are critically in need of updating and changing. I'm not saying the system is perfect because it isn't. And there are things that do need to get better. And if people are successful in ballots, I often feel like there should be a cool down period. And then people that weren't successful in the last ballot have a better chance of being successful in the next ballot. So there is definitely work that needs to be done in that regard. But it's done a big work in preventing touting, in diminishing, not preventing it, but certainly diminishing touting. More needs to be done to tackle these horrible people that are ticket touts and just swindle people for hundreds of pounds for tickets. It's a horrible business. But hopefully this system continues to help. I mean, identification attached to tickets is definitely a thing that needs to be implemented soon, but it needs to be done in a way in which people can get into the ground as seamlessly and as quickly without that causing more backlogs, and that's a balance that is very difficult to find as well. Tizer says, Tom, do you think the location of the ultras is an issue, being near the family enclosure? Maybe, but I mean, the family enclosure has got a lot of young kids who are very passionate about Arsenal, and at the same time, they're as passionate about Arsenal as anyone else as well. So a lot of those kids are screaming their lungs out when they go to watch the game with their family and friends. And like, if it the North Bank is obviously full of season ticket holders as well, so who create a great atmosphere in their own right. So that's always something worth pointing out. Corey says, and Sean says the family enclosure doesn't exist. So there you go. That kind of debunks that myth. Corey says, I'm 26 from Australia. I've been supporting Arsenal for 16 years now. I watch probably 100 YouTube videos per week regarding Arsenal in every game and the training videos and the press conferences. I bleed Arsenal. And that's what I mean. Like, people like Corey are as much of a fan as any season ticket holder who goes to games. They get up at silly o'clock in the morning. And the support and the commitment that it takes to support Arsenal around the world is crazy. Absolutely crazy. Edison says, Tom, I'm from Trinidad, but live in California now. I've been following Arsenal since 2002, and it's 2:55 a.m. here, and I don't go to bed until your show is done, and I'm referred to as a tourist fan. I better wrap this one up then, so Edison can go to sleep. Thank you so much to all of you, of course, who've tuned in. I don't mind going off on these tangents sometimes, having some more grounded discussions. Of course, we've talked about the game a lot. The whole first half of the show, half an hour of the show was all about the football. So I like going off on these tangents sometimes and having these conversations and dispelling some myths and giving you some hard truths. Some people that need to hear it as well. So it's really good to see so much kind of love and community and family here as well. So thank you, as always, for tuning in. Please drop a like before you go and help the channel out by subscribing as we try and aim to reach the Emirates Stadium capacity by the end of this very exciting year that is, of course, 2024 for Arsenal. So let's see what happens. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.